Want to ensure your app developers can create secure and smooth login experiences for your customers? With Curity, you can protect user identities, secure apps and websites, and manage API access. Find out more at curity.io.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the InfoQ podcast. I'm Thomas Betts, co-host of the podcast, and a senior principal software engineer at Blackbaud. Today I'm speaking with Tammy Bryant Butow. Tammy is the principal SRE at Gremlin, where she works on chaos engineering, the facilitation of controlled experiments to identify systemic weaknesses. Gremlin helps engineers build resilient systems using their control plane and API. Tammy previously led the SRE teams at DropBox, responsible for databases and storage systems used by over 500 million customers. Prior to this, Tammy worked at DigitalOcean and at one of Australia's largest banks in security engineering, product engineering, and infrastructure engineering. Tammy is the co-founder of Girl Geek Academy, a movement to teach 1 million girls technical skills by 2025. Tammy, welcome to the InfoQ podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Thomas. Great to be here.
So a few months ago, you spoke at QCon Plus about an SRE Apprenticeship program. I want to set the stage, and first I think it'll be helpful to our listeners to know, what do you do at Gremlin? What's the product you work on? What is chaos engineering as a capital C, capital E product?
Gremlin is a chaos engineering service, and as a company, we're on a mission to help build a more reliable internet. I've been at Gremlin for almost 4 years now. So I joined after I'd worked at DropBox, which is where we did the SRE Apprenticeship program. And at Gremlin, what we've created is a SaaS platform to help engineers safely experiment on complex systems in order to identify weaknesses before they impact customers and cause revenue loss. So we're really helping folks prevent catastrophes, avoid huge downtime. And Gremlin was founded by our CEO, Colton Andrews, and our CTO, his nickname is Fawny, and that was back in 2016. So since then, we've raised $26.8 million in funding from Redpoint Ventures, Index Ventures, and Amplify Partners. And our customers are JPMC, Grubhub, Twilio, Walmart, and many more. So it's really exciting to be able to be practicing chaos engineering and working for a chaos engineering company. I've been practicing chaos engineering for over 12 years. So perfect place for me to work.
Yeah, sounds like it. So let's move on to, you said at DropBox is where you had this SRE apprenticeship program. I want to understand, why did you take the effort to make a formal apprenticeship program? What were the goals? And I guess maybe in your own words, describe what is the role of an SRE you were trying to accomplish with that?
When I first joined DropBox, I was the SRE manager initially for the databases team. And they'd asked me, can you please look after this team first, which is, Dropbox at the time had 200 million customers, 500 petabytes of data. It's, a lot of responsibility there. And the team was very small. So when I first started working at Dropbox, the databases team was about 4 people. And we definitely needed to be able to hire more SREs to work at Dropbox, work on the infrastructure team. But it's very hard to hire SREs. Like, everyone would know this out there. If you've tried to hire site reliability engineers, it's hard to find them. A lot of the time, there's not so many of them, and they work at companies where they're very happy. They're enjoying their work. So it's hard to get them to come and, hey, what about coming over to work with us? We thought, well, instead of trying to poach SREs from other companies, what if we could create more SREs? So I sat down with one of our directors of engineering. His name's Andrew. And we decided to think through, how could we create these SREs? So first off, we thought, well, what about some type of apprenticeship program? And in my spare time, I've been running a company called Girl Geek Academy, where we train up girls and women to learn technical skills. And we've had a lot of success there, teaching folks how to code, how to use tools like, Raspberry Pi, different types of things like that, 3D printing, all sorts of stuff. Basically, we could teach them anything in a day and they would be able to just do it. So we were like, wow, you really can teach folks things if you have a great curriculum and you make sure that you focus on what you want them to learn. And you're very, very clear about that, what the success metrics are, what the goals are for this curriculum and this training program. So using those learnings, we then also thought, all right, let's try and take folks who have no experience at all. And then let's also see, are there folks who would like to become SREs? Because a few people had said, how do I become an SRE if I'm an engineer already, or if I'm maybe a technical program manager? And so we made the program open to both types of folks. And that was also a really good experiment to be able to see like who thrives, can this work for both types of different people? And that's originally where the whole idea started. We got approval from our VP of infrastructure engineering. His name's Akil, really awesome. It's so cool that he was like 100% on board and supportive. And we got approval and everything from the people team. They were super supportive as well. Obviously, like recruiting is very happy to help out with this. And it was just such a cool thing to have support from everyone across the company. And we also thought it might help us improve diversity of talent as well. So actually, we hired 2 women through the program, 3 women actually, 2 women of color as well. So pretty amazing. And it was small. The first cohort was actually 3 women and 1 guy. So yeah.
And then what were you seeing as like, these are the skills of a site reliability engineer? You said you can teach anybody anything as long as you know what your goals are and you have a good curriculum. What do you see as the actual skills? Because I like the idea that you don't have to have a degree in computer science to be good at SRE, but what does help? Is it a mindset? Is it just skills you need to learn?
Yeah, it's definitely a bunch of different things. You know, it's always interesting too. So my background is like very traditional. I studied computer science as a bachelor's degree. I did master's degree as well later on after working for several years as an engineer. So I didn't come from a non-traditional background. I just did like the traditional path straight out of school. I'd been on the internet since 95. I've been building computers, you know, for as long as I can remember, making things on the internet. But I really was like, you know, there's not so many of us. Like when I look around, I don't meet many women like me. Like this is not normal. Like, you know, I've had like 3 women in my entire degree. My master's degree was even less women. Most of my classes had no women. So I knew that that really wasn't going to be like the best approach if we wanted to improve diversity as well. And so thinking through like, what do you want folks to be able to do? Like, what are the key critical skills you need to do to be an SRE? A great thing to think about is like, what do you interview for? So you can kind of like reverse engineer it like that. So at DropBox, we already had our SRE interview, which was focused on coding, troubleshooting, architecture, communication skills, culture. So those are like the 5 areas that we focused on. So if you think about it like this, like we're going to run an apprenticeship program for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, we would want these SRE apprentices to be able to pass our regular SRE interview. Like, is that possible? Like, that's the experiment. And the apprentices that we ended up hiring, you know, they're on proper great salary, similar to like what their coworkers on. They're on the same salaries and everything, but they knew that it was an experiment. You know, you don't have a guaranteed job. This is a 6-month apprenticeship. And at the end, if you pass the interview, you'll have a job. And so it was all about that. Like, how can we help them learn the skills that they need to be able to actually be able to pass that interview and then be able to perform their job? And since that time, it's actually been 5 years since we launched the apprenticeship program. I didn't want to speak about it too early because, you know, who knows if it was going to be a success. But since then, all of these folks are still working as engineers, doing really great in their careers, have gotten promotions. We then went on to hire more apprentices after that. So pretty amazing.
I'm wondering, did some of the apprentices become teachers for subsequent apprentices?
Yeah. So initially, like, we didn't want them to feel overloaded with that because, you know, they have a lot to learn still. And honestly, I think it's better to have folks who are principal and staff engineers be the mentors for SREs specifically, because there's just so much to learn. And that's what we did with the initial first batch. So it was part of the apprenticeship program. One of the most important things is to have kind of like this match between a Jedi and a Padawan. So you want someone super experienced to match with the Padawan to teach them everything they need to know and to be like this wise person that's going to help them. The idea there too is you got to do it in 6 months. So, you know, an SRE apprentice that's just graduated could teach someone else how to be an SRE apprentice, but it's going to take them way longer. You know, that's not like their core knowledge yet. So that's, you know, they helped out a little bit, but it wasn't their primary goal. Their main goal was to just focus on being the best SRE that they could be.
I think that's also one of those things that defines what principal and senior roles should be. You're not just doing the work, you have this mentoring responsibility. And I think a lot of companies are trying to find informal ways to do mentoring. And it's not often you encounter something that's this formalized, where a dedicated part of your job is training this other person.
Yes, totally. And I actually way prefer that. Like, one, it's way more rewarding for the principal staff engineer, the senior engineer. they're able to be like, okay, like our goal is to help you get ramped up, to help you learn everything you need to be an effective member on my team. So like the other thing too is this person is on your team. So they're doing work that you can assign to them. You're reviewing their code. You're able to help them grow and learn. And that's like really cool because they're an extra person to help you out to hit your milestones. And all of the principal engineers were very, very happy with that. They're like, this is great. Like I can assign them work. Like they'll come to me and ask me great questions. They were learning a lot from all of the questions they were being asked as well. And everybody passed the interview, like to cut to the end, like, everyone passed the interview. They did a really great job. And they all were so thankful to their mentors, their senior engineers that helped them on the journey.
I kind of want to pull that thread a little bit. What did the principal engineers learn from the experience? What did they then take back to their job and say, okay, well, I've done the apprenticeship program. Maybe they signed up for another cohort. Maybe they went back. But obviously, I know I learned from trying to explain things to other people that the act of having to be coherent enough to explain something makes me understand something that much more. Did you find that same growth happened on both sides and that the principals were better at their jobs in ways?
Yeah, like so many things came out of that for these senior engineers. Like I'd say one of the main things is they developed rock solid leadership skills. Like that was huge. They already obviously had leadership skills because they'd made it to that senior level of engineer. And, for folks listening who are already senior, you know what that's like. You need to be able to get into a room with your CTO, with other executives, people from maybe other departments as well, and present a plan. Maybe it's even like a 2-5-year transformational journey plan of how you're going to completely transform everything and what that's going to look like. Get buy-in, get headcount. Like all of these things take a lot of leadership skills, but their leadership skills just like dramatically improved through doing this one-on-one mentoring session for 6 months, which is pretty amazing. It was kind of like, I'd say like a mini leadership training, but very dedicated and very focused. And also all of them got promoted after as well, which was amazing because they just like excelled at their work after that. And they did so well that they all got promotions, which we didn't know that was going to happen, but that did happen.
Yeah, the unintended consequences, they're really good to hear.
Yeah.
So I wonder, for secondary cohorts, did anyone from within the company apply and say, I want to shift over and be an SRE? Maybe they had been trying to do a little bit of the work and then said, oh, I kind of like experimenting and trying this chaos stuff or looking into it. And they said, I want to go through it, but I need some help.
Yeah, that even happened actually for the first cohort too. So originally we were going to just hire external folks. The good thing about having a structured program like this, something more formal, is that you can promote it internally. It's not like secret mentoring that's happening that no one knows about. And that's like really important. So the reason that it's important is think about it like this. Like we go up to, engineering all hands, share that we're going to run this apprenticeship program. There's project managers in the room. There's engineering leaders in the room. There's senior engineers. There's junior engineers. Everyone knows about it now. So they're able to tell their friends, like, we're running this experiment. If you'd like to get involved, let us know. If you want to be a mentor, if you want to participate. So we did have one program manager put her hand up, and she was a TPM. She'd been working at the company for like a few years already, and she'd done great work, but she wanted to learn to be an SRE. She was like, really, like, I love seeing what the SREs do. I would like to have that as a job. Like, can I apply for the program? And we were like, yeah, totally. Like, you can interview with everyone else. If you pass the first interview, there was like an apprentice interview, which was not as hard as the SRE regular interview, and she passed it. So then she was accepted into the program. The other thing too, like, just to explain, like, how did folks get promotions from doing this work, like these senior engineers? Often people talk about how hard it is to get promoted for the work that you do. But I think a lot of the time it's because that work is invisible, and that's not good. Like, you need to be able to actually share with people what work you're doing. And if you've already got buy-in to run a program, you've participated in the program, you've been super open the entire time about the results, people have seen you do that work for 6 months, like, that's way better of a story than, oh yeah, I've been mentoring like 10 different people over the last year. And then, like, who are these people? How did you actually help them? What was the result? What did they achieve? Like, did anything come from it? Like, there's just no good story there. So this program, like, making it public, inviting folks to participate, sharing the stories during the program, I think that was a way better way to do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of big companies do have like a summer internship program, and that's the only time. But even then, it's sometimes a little squishy, like, oh, we might have a project that someone can pick up and we kind of let people run on their own. And I always like the end of the summer. It's like, here we get to see what these people did. And after, 10 weeks, you're like, really? That in 10 weeks, you did all of that and you had no experience. Like, this is your first time sitting down, hands to keyboard at a real job, and you're able to produce that. Like, I think back to when I was an intern and I'm like, I did some stuff, but you're always impressed with what people are able to do when it's just like that learning growth opportunity. And then it's displayed publicly for everyone to recognize this is going on. This is what we recognize in the company.
Yeah, totally. Like the best things I've seen there as well is like a science fair of intern projects where every engineer across the company is invited to actually like go and see what the interns created. And they have a little table with their computer and they demonstrate it. So definitely recommend doing those sorts of things too for regular internship programs. I think like the reason that a regular internship program doesn't work as good for SREs is because, we have had a few people come through the intern program as SREs, but 6 months is like a really good amount of time to help someone train up and learn about your systems enough, because it is such a critical role in terms of like, you're going to want to put these folks on call for production. Can you trust them on call? Like, I don't think I've ever put an intern on call ever, but the idea is at the end of this apprenticeship, your SREs would be able to be on call because they're trained up and they've passed the interview. And so that's a big responsibility. I mean, I was put on call when I very first started, pretty much on my first week of work, graduating straight out of university. But I don't know if that was a great idea looking back.
Yeah, I think on-call is one of those things that a lot of companies struggle with new employees. It's like, well, you get your feet wet, you jump in the deep end, whatever metaphor you want to have. But you also sometimes are setting people up to fail because, you have to have enough of a support net for them to not drown when they jump in the deep end. And the idea of saying someone who's only here for 10 weeks for a summer internship is a lot different than you're here for 6 months. This is for the long haul and you're hoping to stick around afterwards.
Exactly. And that's the thing too of like, the engineers are going to put in a lot of effort to train these folks up, to teach them about the systems, to help them shadow on-call situations because they know that these folks want to stick around. Like sometimes with an intern, like they might come and do their first internship with you, then do another internship somewhere else, and they might never return. So it's very different. Also, I come from Australia where we don't really do internships that much. It's not very common. So, not every country does internships like in America. So if you're listening in from a different country and you're like, what are these 10-week internships? Never heard of it. I hadn't either till I moved to America. So all good there.
And it's also very regional. Like you have to have enough of a university around so the companies can hire and they know that there's enough people coming in. So yeah, there's a whole support system that has to be in place for it to exist. I do want to go back. You said something about teaching people on call and it was shadowing. And I think that's a great skill for SREs, but I think there's also something to be said about how do you just teach someone? Because a lot of our listeners are not site reliability engineers. They're developers, programmers, principal engineers, whatever. But they do have some of the mentoring. How do you sit down and teach somebody what you're doing? In most cases, they have coding skills, but how do you teach them? Here's what's important in our domain. Here's how you do it. Do you just come up with scenarios that you made up for the purpose of training? Or is it better to sit down with real world examples and walk them through? It's like, let's solve this problem together.
So I'll break it down in terms of coding projects and projects where you're building, tooling, automation, and then also on-call. So there's two different approaches for those different things. If we're talking about coding projects, then what I really recommend is allowing the apprentices to learn by doing. So the important thing there is they should be allocated task work, and it should be broken into small bite-sized tasks that they can take on. And, if you read books like Accelerate, great book. I was just reading that again recently and wrote up like a book review on my Medium. If you read Accelerate, it says, you should make sure if you want to be a high-performing technology team that you can do work within less than a week, and you can ship an MVP. So they're like really... That book is very much against the whole idea of like doing code for months and months and months and then shipping out a huge, big patch of work. And, that's not possible in all industries, like, for example, games. But if you're working in majority of other types of industries, you can do that. You can break your work down into week-long tasks or less even. So what I recommend for apprentices is actually starting off by giving them like one day of work. Hey, today I want you to do this. And like you have to do the estimation for them. You have to get to know them. Sometimes you might give them a little bit too much, a little bit too less, but you really need to think through that. Like, how much can my apprentice get done in a day? And then once you feel pretty comfortable that you know how much they can do in a day, like maybe that's like a week worth of 1 day tasks. Then the next week you extend it a little bit more, give them some 2 day tasks, some 3 day tasks, and then see how they go with that, because you're gradually just giving them more space to be able to learn, to grow, and encourage them too to not just come to you as their mentor, but to also go to other folks. Like, you don't have to know all of the information. Like, encourage them to chat to the other apprentices in the program. That's why it's also really good to have a cohort at the same time, and then ask them to meet other people in other teams, invite them along to meetings so they can like hear how you talk to other people. The other thing we would do for code review at the start of the program, we didn't do regular code review where you just like submit your code via GitHub and someone reviews it remotely and then just like you see the result. It's kind of like a little bit too invisible for an apprentice. They don't understand what's happening and they can't ask questions easily. So it's like really not a great approach for an apprentice. Great for a senior engineer because you can just keep moving, get feedback quickly and go on with your day. But it's better to do it in real time with an apprentice. So what we would do is we would pull up their code on the big screen in the office. You can do this on Zoom. Pull up their code and go through it line by line and give them feedback and ask questions and have a discussion about it. Why did you choose to do this? Why did you choose to do that? Kind of imagine it like if you were doing a coding interview and you're like asking someone about why they chose to do certain things with their code. Like, that's what we do. And then we would give them some tips for like how to improve it, for performance or reliability or security, like whatever it was. And then at the end, they submit that code. So it's like actually like a real life code review. And, you know, that actually worked really well. We didn't do so much pair programming, which I think pair programming is great actually. And I learned to code definitely in my early days doing a lot of pair programming. I remember I sat next to this one guy that was like amazing senior engineer. Probably for 3 months we were working on a project together and we sat together every day. And that was like awesome actually. I learned so much from him, but that's kind of hard too in this remote world where people are very busy and going to a lot of meetings. So I think these days doing okay, you write your code and then let's review it together. That works well.
Yeah, especially when I was younger, earlier in my career, you tend to thrash more. You sit there and like, I don't know where to go. Being able to get that quick feedback. It's like, I'm just stuck on this. Help me walk through that little bit. The pair programming helps. And sometimes it's even just a rubber duck. You need to have someone to talk to and just like explain your problem. And so having someone that you know you can always go to, and having that, I can go up to the principal that's my primary mentor, but also I can go sideways to the other apprentice and see, well, you might have something similar. Let's talk through this on the same level.
Exactly. Like really encourage them to build bridges. Like that's super important. And that's a great skill for them as they continue in their career, that they can build their own bridges across the organization. They can build relationships. A lot of it also is about teaching them how to communicate with other engineers in different teams. Like, you know, what context do you need to share before you ask for help to solve a problem? That's something that I think is really key. But they learn that really fast. You just demonstrate, hey, if you're asking someone to solve a problem, share this information up front, then give a link to what you want, then ask them or tell them like any urgency related to that, like if it's due soon or something like that. That helps people be able to help you.
One of the topics we highlighted in this year's InfoQ Software Architecture and Trends report, or two of them, were designing for resilience and designing for observability. And I feel like that's right in the sweet spot for site reliability engineering. Software architecture, your primary role as an architect is to take in and understand multiple viewpoints. And sometimes you can get a lot of insight from a fresh set of eyes. Like if you keep talking to the same people over and over again, you kind of hear the same answers. You get someone brand new, like an apprentice coming in, and you said you brought them to meetings. Do you think that it's useful to have an apprentice in a safe situation talk to the architect, and the architect would benefit from showing them their design and saying, where should we improve this? What do you think we need?
We definitely did that for sure, 100%. We definitely did that for architecture discussions, like when we were designing new architecture, because you know they want to stick around. So yeah, you want to have them in there because eventually they're going to be like contributing to this platform or software that you're building out. So when we were like designing a new system, maybe say at the time we were working on improving our like backup system. So invite them into the meeting, have them see all of the discussions that are happening, see how we love whiteboarding. I'm like a huge fan of whiteboarding during work hours to be able to explain something. It's because I'm very visual, so it just helps me when someone would whiteboard something and talk through it. And you can do that online these days with like tools like Miro, but that helps them learn too how to communicate their ideas. Like you don't just have to sell your idea by talking about it. Like you can draw a diagram live. Like, that's even better often than like coming with a pre-prepared diagram. Like if you can draw it live and explain it to folks, it like just helps you communicate what you're trying to talk about, and it gives them a chance to ask questions. It doesn't overload the people that are there, and they learn so many skills from just watching the staff engineers and principal engineers that they could then like do that themselves when they were presenting their ideas to get feedback from their engineer that they were matched with. So I saw so much great stuff from that. The other thing we invited them to was postmortems. That was really good too, because they could see like what happens when something goes wrong, and the VP of infrastructure is in that meeting, and he would like talk through things, ask great questions. The engineers on the teams would respond. So the apprentices were always there to be able to observe and learn and everything. And, that was awesome too. I asked them afterwards if they enjoyed that, if that was good use of their time. They're like, yeah, like that was so interesting. I learned so much about how all the systems work together. Because in postmortems, we would do a lot of whiteboarding about dependencies, and there'd maybe be like 20, 30 people in the room. So you would just learn a ton in that 1 hour session.
And then what's the flip side? Like if the apprentice sat down in the room, what advice can they give to the architect, the staff engineers? Do they bring that perspective of what's important to me is I need to be able to find out when an incident happens, what's going wrong? And so does your design account for that SRE viewpoint? Because I think sometimes the SRE is an afterthought, and we're trying to get better at that. It's like, oh, we didn't think about making it observable because no one was in the room. Can the apprentice brand new come in and say, I need this because this is what's important to my job?
Yeah, I would say like, that would be great if apprentices did that. I think like generally they often are a bit shy because they just started. So usually they were more asking questions about like, how are we building this, or trying to clarify what the architecture looked like, what type of database, like maybe they might ask, how are we going to monitor this? Like what kinds of alerts will we set up for this? More like questions like that, just like gaining the basic sort of information about the system, and then like understanding how it relates to what we do as SREs, definitely. But I think like over the 6 months, they definitely grew as they got more experience, and that's okay. It takes time to be able to understand things. And like first you might go into a room and just be like, what are they talking about? This sounds like they're from a different planet. Like that's like really what it's like for apprentices. I didn't realize that until we did the program. But just even things like, what is Nginx? Like how do I even say that word when I see it written down on a piece of paper? Like that's like, things like that. People are just like, what is all this stuff? Like there's just all these words that when you've been an engineer for a long time, what everything means and you understand where it fits in your architecture. But this is like so much knowledge to grasp when you first start out as an apprentice. So yeah, that's what I would say is like give them the time to learn, draw them diagrams, help them understand where things fit into the bigger picture. And then they'll start to ask really great questions, and then that will help you improve over time.
Yeah, there's always the learning curve with any industry. I feel like say that, software's got more acronyms, but I think you go anywhere, everyone has acronyms, everyone has terms. Some of that you have to learn by doing. And I like that the apprenticeship was a little bit more of an intentional program to say, we're going to take the time to teach you these things. And yes, we're going to teach you how to say Nginx and whatnot. So I wanted to wrap up. You mentioned it briefly, but I was curious more about the Girl Geek Academy and trying to teach 1 million girls technical skills by 2025. So you said it's technical skills. It's not just teach girls coding. How are you doing that? Where is it? And how do people get involved?
So we have a website, girlgeekacademy.com, and we're also on Twitter, Girl Geek Academy. And mostly we're just focused in Australia because I'm Australian, live in America now though. And the Australian government has been very supportive. Like they gave us like over $1 million to be able to do this work, which we've been doing it for several years now. And mostly we do it through running hackathons. So that's actually been really cool. And we do them for different age groups. So we do have like a Miss Makes Code, which is about helping young girls learn to code when they're around 5 to 8 years old. And then as you get older, we teach you not just coding, but other skills as well. So a lot of like hardware hacking too, which I think is pretty cool. Like, when you think about Raspberry Pi, like why was that invented? They really wanted to be able to create a technology that helped get folks curious about how computers work instead of just learning about like software on top of it, understanding like, and this makes a great computer scientist. Like if you go to university, it's really great to understand like how things actually work, like underneath inside your computer, if you can like build your own computer. Then we also taught them like, 3D printing, really anything that they wanted to learn, we would do it off request. Also how to build games, because one of our founders actually makes video games. She's won a lot of awards for that. Her name's Lacey. She works at League of Geeks full-time, gaming company, been there many years. And we also have a security engineer too, so we teach that too. So lots of different skills, but primarily just for Australia right now, if you're lucky to be in Australia.
I know we have listeners all around the world, so hopefully someone will hear and maybe be enough to get involved or have their daughters and other friends go and attend.
Yep, sounds great.
That's about all the time we have for today. I want to thank Tammy Bryant Butow for joining me on the InfoQ podcast. We hope you'll join us again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tammy.